Parents of criminals, how has your child's crimes affected the way you feel about them? My youngest son is locked up on a drug charge. He violated probation by getting arrested for yet another drug charge and is currently awaiting transfer to state prison. He hasn't been tried for the second drug charge yet. How do I feel about him? I love him, but am deeply disappointed. Letters and phone calls are a bit awkward, but he is still my son and he always will be. Have I failed as a parent? All parents fail. Nobody comes out of a family unscathed. My other 2 kids are doing just fine, so nah, I really don't feel like a failure. There's still a lot of guilt, though. The thing I feel most guilty about is that I sleep a little easier knowing he's reasonably safe. My kid was always curious, the light of my life. One day I come home from work and he's in my room trying to eat my mattress. He saw me and charged straight for me. He figured nobody would know about his sick eating habits if he killed the only witness. I had to put him down right there in my room. He died on the way to the hospital. He would have been charged with assault, but I guess I ended that. TL. Doctor. Fucking goats, man. I know that I did everything in my power to keep my youngest son from getting into trouble. He has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and is sociopathic. I had him going to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and on med with no insurance. Almost lost the house, but family is more important. The last time he moved out / ran away, at 17, he stopped taking his meds. He is going to be 19 soon. He once punched me in the eye so hard that it fractured my eye socket. He lies about everything. Some lies are so outlandish that I struggle not to call him out on them because he will only double down with more lies. He moves from friend's house to friend's house using them until they get sick of it. He has unsuccessfully tried living with extended family members. His sales pitch to them is I'm trying to straighten out my life, but the last person I was living with did this and that to screw it up. He only gets a job when all other choices have run out. He only comes around to either blame me for his life being a disaster or to try to con me out of money or a ride somewhere. I love him as much as a father can love a son, but I do not like him. He was raised the same way as his brother. The only preferential treatment he received was all the medical. I pray that I die before him. I'm afraid that his choices and lifestyle will have him killed sooner than later. I watched what my parents went through when my sister died at 20. I was 16. And I don't ever want to go through life outliving my own child. I'm not a parent, but I just watched this TED talk by Andrew Solomon. In it, Solomon talks about how he interviewed the parents of one of the perpetrators of the Columbine massacre. The mother said this: "You know, when it first happened, I used to wish that I had never married, that I had never had children. If I hadn't gone to Ohio State and crossed paths with Tom, this child wouldn't have existed, and this terrible thing wouldn't have happened. But I've come to feel that I love the children I had so much that I don't want to imagine a life without them. I recognize the pain they caused to others, for which there can be no forgiveness, but the pain they caused to me, there is," she said. "So while I recognize that it would have been better for the world if Dylan had never been born, I've decided that it would not have been better for me." Not a parent, but one night I told my father I'd drank and smoked at a party. Knowing my dad is against anything illegal, I thought I was going to be scolded at, grounded, etc. Turns out my dad did cocaine in high school, and I was later called a pussy by my father. I have talked fairly extensively with my great aunt about her daughter who is now in prison. She is heartbroken that her daughter is in the situation she is, but would agree with everyone that she deserves to be in prison and that it is probably best for her. After many years of alcoholism and no attempted rehab, her daughter drove the wrong way on the highway twice, the second time killing a 9-year-old boy. So obviously there was no intent to murder anyone, but her repeated decision to not fix her problem resulted in an unimaginably terrible accident. For this reason my great aunt still loves her daughter very much and visits her often, but of course is devastated at the poor choices she made. That said, she talks about how she frequently struggles with the idea that it was her fault and all the turmoil that comes with that. To make matters worse, my great uncle has disowned his daughter and berates my great aunt for even visiting her. Despite this, my great aunt does her best to maintain a relationship with her daughter and encourages others to visit / write to her as well. The worst part is, her daughter is devastated and depressed over her mistakes and desperately lonely and unhappy, with no chance of parole or freedom for the next 23 years. Thought this was somewhat relevant. Note, I refer to my great aunt's daughter impersonally because I have never met her. My great aunt is the epitome of a loving, kind aunt, and we are pretty close because of this, but I never met her daughter since she was never around. Well, I'm not a parent, but I'm still parenting. I'm one of 6 kids, and the third kid got twice on heroin in 1 week, ended up in the hospital both times, and then was arrested for possession of meth a few days after she was released from the hospital. The whole thing seemed sudden, but we realized that we were oblivious. I knew she was doing molly, shrooms, and smoking weed, but I never thought she would move on to heroin and meth. I was in her room one day, using her computer, and saw a box of pills. I googled all of the identifiers on the pills, and realized they were opiates. I took them to my parents, and tried to tell them she was doing serious shit, but I was pretty much ignored. It wasn't until we got a call from her friend saying that she had seen my sister shooting up heroin that they actually became concerned. They forced her into rehab for a few months, and when she was released, that's when she relapsed and started odding, and then was arrested. My issues lie more with my family than with my sister. I understand that she has an addiction that is very hard to overcome, even with support, and so I just wish my family had listened to me sooner. I'm disappointed that my sister doesn't see anything wrong with how she is treating her body and her family, but I understand that a lot of it comes with the territory of an addiction. She's blind to it all. I'm angry with her because of the pain this has inflicted on my family, but I still love her as much as I always have. My mom left us when all of this started happening, so I'm raising my younger sister, and arguably, raising my older ones too. My issues really are with the ignorance and naivete of my entire family. A lot of this couldn't have been prevented, but the situation could be a lot easier if my family would communicate about what has happened and what will happen. My sister was bailed out on Thursday with my tuition money, thanks to my mother, who did this without telling anyone. TL. Doctor, my sister was just in prison for possession of meth. Sometimes you have to accept the situation for what it is, and realize that the person doesn't understand what they've done has affected everyone around them. I'm disappointed and angry, but I still love her. Well, not a parent, but at our orphanage a boy named Tom turned out to be a mass murderer. You would have never suspected it from him though. Sharp boy, polite and amazing grades. My aunt could make millions for the DARE program. She's done everything. DUI to heroin possession. I don't know the full story, but I heard she abused her leg veins with chemicals so much that they were both at risk for amputation. One eventually was, so she gets prescription medication that she abuses the fuck out of. She's also drifting back to the illicit stuff even after a few years in jail. Here's the kicker, my grandparents fund her. They bought her several homes that she and her friends trashed. She'd pull her I'm getting clean. I need a new place to do that. The cycle repeats. She needs a car for a job. They get her one. It gets stolen or sold for drugs. She needs a new car for her job. Grandmother was in the hospital, in bad shape. Everyone's gathered for the worst. Aunt runs in with an car dealership's catalog. Mom, I've got to have this car. I need to get to my job. Grandfather had a lot of valuable stock and 3 meters along with veterans assistance from the Korean War. He's scraping by on Medicare because they've been funneling all of their money into a drug addict for decades. They never even thought about cutting her off, even though she's promised to clean up before every house, car, grocery bill, utilities bill, hospital bill, and jail sentence. We're into the hundreds on supposed sobering exploits. I actually hope she dies, so that my grandfather won't have to worry about covering his expenses in his final days, which are drawing close. My then 20-year-old son went to jail for 3 months for the burglary of an ATV storage shed, this after getting a DUI several months earlier. It was harder than hell to look him in the eye, and admittedly I was so angry about it. I only saw him 3 times in jail. His mother went weekly. It was only when he got out that I realized how troubled he had become, after I helped him fill out a drug questionnaire for his parole and discovered he had taken every drug on the list, and that the burglary was so he and his friends could get drug money. We lived in a small town in Illinois with a varsity blues mentality, and he got mixed up in drugs when he was on the football team, but I had no idea he was doing more than pot, and even that was an assumption. Unfortunately, he was always more of a follower than a leader, and he was led down the wrong road. As for me feeling as a failure as a parent, it did cross my mind, but honestly what I learned from all this is that you can't necessarily blame the parents for the way their children turn out. I'm not saying I was a perfect parent, but we always tried to lead by example, and our son grew up in a stable and loving home. His choices were exactly that, his choices. But I still rack my brain thinking of times he may have actually been crying for help, but I didn't recognize at the time. The good news is he got clean in jail, and now 8 years later he has his life mostly together, or as much as someone with a felony on their record can be. I think that's the worst part about it, is he'll have that chase him for the rest of his life, though he fortunately has a career as an OTR truck driver and is doing well. My uncle has recently been in jail twice for DUIs. He is now 42 years old and is back living with his parents. His parents, my grandparents, seem really ignorant about the whole situation. They were never mad or disappointed, and now that he is out, they pay for his school, car, food, etc. And they don't even care that he doesn't have a job. Basically, they act like it never happened and still treat my uncle like he is a kid. Not going to say the crime, but it resulted in more than a year in prison, not jail. Didn't change much, because it pretty much fit in with the pattern of behavior before. Still love the kid, just don't trust him anymore. Where I might, before, have sided with him. If someone said something bad about him, I'm not really willing to give him the benefit of the doubt anymore, and I tend to believe that person's story, rather than my own kids, all else being equal. This will likely get buried, but figured I'd comment anyway. To start, I'm 32 now. I was a terrible kid. Arrested for possession, stole things, drank all the time. Basically gave my mother hell from 12 to 20. She was a single mother, raising me and my brother, and she did her best. I'd have never admitted it at the time, but she really did. She always says now that she feels she failed as a parent. But she never did. She did the best she could with what she had, and I won't change a thing. All of those tired lines you hear from people, one day you're going to realize all I did for you, and you're going to look back on this one day and realize why I did this ECT. It's all true. Every word. Looking back on it all, after I put myself through college, and I'm raising a 10-year-old autistic girl as a single parent, I truly realize how tough my mother had it, and God bless her for it. I was a terrible kid, and she always loved me. I tell her every time we talk about how terrible I was, and what a good job she did. She cries. Every time. So I guess to answer the question, your family always loves you, but they often feel failure and frustration, because nothing they ever told you worked, or you didn't listen. And I'd imagine they feel a bit helpless. When it comes down to it, you simply can't control people. You can only hope to guide them into making a good decision. My sister, who I don't talk to anymore, is in jail on drug charges. Apparently she took off a house arrest bracelet and said she'd rather be in jail. My parents still hold out hope that she'll magically change. I have mourned the loss of the sister, that she was pre-drugs and prostitution. I pretty much expect a call that she owed it or something similar within a year of her release. Call me cold-hearted, but she's done enough to the family. I won't sit by and expect her to suddenly become an upstanding citizen. Not a parent, but I grew up watching my mom destroy her life with drugs. We've had our fights. I've ran away, told her the meanest things anyone can tell anyone. I've seen her overdose and at her lowest point with drugs, but she's always been my best friend. She's my mommy, and no matter what she was strung out on at the time, she did her best to make sure me and my sister had a decent life. She sold wedding items to try and make money for Christmas. She didn't always succeed at things like this, and most of the time the drugs took over, but she still tried. Eventually, the drugs got her. She passed away a few years ago, and I miss her. I miss her more than words can say, and so does the rest of my family. Even through all her worst times, we still loved her and cared about her. We were disappointed, pissed, upset anytime she got really bad or ended up in jail again, but she was still our mom, wife, daughter, sister, whatever. She can't hurt herself anymore though. I'm glad for that at least. This question doesn't apply to me, but I'm in a situation that these parents may be able to advise me on. Just last week I found out my good friend from grade school, we lost touch after going to separate middle and high schools, was arrested for massive child pornography charges. He made many very shocking and embarrassing admissions to police, all of which are a matter of public record now, so once all the hearings are over he's looking at a substantial amount of prison time. He is only in his mid-20s. I cannot fathom how his parents are reacting to having their home raided and all of this evidence uncovered. His parents were very lovely people when I knew them. We were both awkward children, so our parents would set up weekly playdates for us, and I would go to his house to play Sonic or whatever, and they treated me like family. I feel like I want to reach out to them, send them a letter or something letting them know that I always found them to be very kind and generous and the true definition of good people. I don't know if that would be appreciated or embarrassing for them, or how long I should wait, or if I should just keep my mouth shut since it has been over 15 years since I've spoken to them. Any advice?